A Conservative commentator has been banned from speaking on a university campus. Pfft, typical lefties. An African American man gets sucker punched at a Trump rally. That's the right wing for you. Anti-Trump protesters have been setting fires and throwing rocks at police. So much for the tolerant left. A white supremacist decided to plough his car into a crowd of protesters. Typical violent right-wing fascists. Society feels incredibly divided. On one side, we have a bunch of commie, virtue-signalling, regressive leftists, and a load of fascist, self-serving, ideological right-wingers on the other. Or at least, that's the impression some loud voices would like to have us believe. But let's just stop and think about this for a moment. If I were to ask you which of these two extremes you most identify with, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of you would say neither of them. And yet, when we look at discussion on social media around some of the world's most pressing issues, there are people who just can't resist boiling everything down to the binary of left and right. Labels that, over time, have morphed into increasingly negative and grotesque caricatures, reflecting the worst elements of our society. And, by being caricatures, they fail to represent the nuanced complexity and character of the mainstream. So how did we get here? Well, for one, the digital age has created an environment where we are on a daily basis bombarded with mass information, leaving many of us still trying to figure out how to deal with it. It's only natural, therefore, that we seek extensions of our pre-existing worldviews, patterns, simplicity, stereotypes, and ultimately, labels. Now, it's worth stressing that this isn't anything new. It's a trend that has long existed in traditional news media for decades. When a dog bites a man, that is not news because it happens so often. But if a man bites a dog, that is news. Is it any wonder why so many news stories of rare behaviour and events, often negative, dominate the news agenda? Let's consider our own struggles. We try to grapple with mass information while navigating through an environment where media outlets offer us worldviews through the lens of selective simplicity. Firstly, when news stories are presented with emphasis on the most extreme and negative aspects, it is easy to lose sight of the wider picture, which actually may be more positive and substantive. For example, if millions protest and several are violent, media coverage and discussion will rarely be weighted towards the wider community and the issues they wish to address. This in turn reinforces the warped perceptions that these labels reinforce. Secondly, when it comes to discussing difficult issues, it takes a lot more time and energy to do so in a nuanced manner, as opposed to putting emphasis on slogans and blame in order to win the argument. Thirdly, in the age of hyper-information, the world can be very daunting due to its size and complexity. So when we are inundated with negative news stories, associating them with a clear enemy can make us feel more in control. If there is an opportunity to pin a negative news story to a personal group who stands for the opposite of what you believe in, the easy path is to do just that, thus helping build up these caricatures and labels in the process. This in turn helps justify the exertion of energy towards extremes, which aren't necessarily reflective of wider society. So what can be done by each of us to help with this situation? Well, for all of us who do not identify with any of these extremes, continue to resist being dragged into one camp or another. Aim to build common ground across the entire landscape of shared ideas and values, in an attempt to bring people towards you, as opposed to pushing those who disagree away. Stay willing to accept that life and its issues require nuanced discussion and solution building, and recognise that constructive progress can only be achieved by exploring the detail of differences we hold. If you see someone using labels, don't respond with insults or slogans of your own. Instead, ask them to clarify and unpack the labels they have presented, because if they choose to do that, you steer the conversation into the realms of productive substance. Now, I know that's easier said than done, and of course, not everyone will do you the respect of listening to your opinion. But the more we look to empathise and establish common ground, the higher the potential for healthy and productive discourse. Because by assuming labels and stereotypes, we give these caricatures strength and allow extremes to become more reflective of our society than they actually are.